Welcome to Coffee Break, the podcast where we dive into the world of advocacy, policy, and the people who shape it. I'm your host, Nathan Willner, and today we have a really special guest as a sought after California lobbyist who's been working in California state capital of Sacramento for more than 20 years. Cliff Costa has a wealth of experience and insights to share. He's also leading one of our most popular sessions at our upcoming executive experience in April, which is not too far from Sacramento. And the title of the session is Advocacy in Action, Case Studies in Successful State Lobbying Efforts. So we're really excited. Cliff, welcome to Coffee Break.
Well, thank you, Nathan. So happy to be here with you. So look forward to our conversation.
Yeah, so before we dive into our main questions, I'd love for you to share, a compelling story from your storied career, maybe something humorous or cautionary, how it's important to play well with others, so to speak. So what can you start us off with?
Well, I have so many war stories over the years, but I want to just take you back to an issue that happened in California literally this past year. Every state has lemon laws. Those are laws related to your car. And just to be clear, I am a lobbyist for a general purpose lobbying firm. So I have a variety of clients, corporate and trade association. But on this case, I have been in the automotive space for a number of years on behalf of a variety of clients. And lemon law in California has been one of the big sort of rubs. And so for years, there have been efforts by automakers to try to go in and reform California's lemon law. And I started to have some quiet conversations on behalf of a couple clients, and those developed into full scale negotiations with California's plaintiffs bar, organized plaintiffs bar organization. And so we were able to find some compromises on a variety of legal procedures. So, how do you deal with a lemon law lawsuit that's been brought to the courts? How fast do you get relief? What does discovery look like? What does a sort of mandatory mediation process look like? Those sort of issues. And so we developed those policies. And I have to say, unfortunately, given the political dynamics in California, we had to do that in secret. Well, that secrecy, no surprise, led to a lot of hurt feelings by both members of the legislature and other automakers who were not part of those conversations. And so when we came to the legislature with about 20 days left in the legislative session, and California's legislative session goes for 9 months. I know a lot of other states go for 45 days or 60 days, but not here in California. We are a full time legislature, so we are always working. But in this situation, we showed up. And unfortunately, because of those secret conversations, Nathan, we were not able to build the coalition that we thought we were going to build. We thought we would have all of the automaker organizations and companies with us. And unfortunately, they felt like we did not get a good enough deal. And so then it became a very combative situation where you had automakers that are my clients and friends of mine for a decade plus. But and ultimately they opposed the bill. We got the bill to the governor's desk. It was a lot of hard work. It was done in a very short period of time. We had many people tell us it was never going to happen. And we made it happen. And ultimately, the governor signed it, and there's cleanup legislation this year. But I tell this story, Nathan, to say one, you can accomplish big things if you can have relationships with people, but also understand that in politics, while you may not agree on every single issue with a friend or a legislator, you're going to find places of compromise. So you can be friends at all times, but you don't necessarily have to agree at all times. And it's at the end of the day, it's shaking those hands, it's feeling like you've accomplished something, and it's being respectful through that process. And I believe that is why we had the success we had this past year, is building that coalition with the plaintiffs bar, despite having the other automaker opposition. So not really related to creditors issues, but a big fight here in California. And if you Google California lemon law reforms, you're going to see a lot of articles beating us up for last minute changes to California's lemon law. So it's just an interesting topic, I think, Nathan.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic story, Cliff. And it really underscores the importance of relationships in this field. Speaking of which, what are some effective strategies um, to build those relationships with legislators uh, that can make it or break it for your clients.
Well, so I fundamentally believe the relationships start back in their districts, Nathan. I think if you know a local legislator and it's somebody you've known for a long time, maybe because they were on a city council or because they were a neighbor of yours you've met at the grocery store or kids played softball with or baseball with or football, whatever. It starts there. You got to remember these legislators are people. They're just regular people who have signed up for an honor to represent their constituents. They have a lot of people coming at them all the time, particularly when they are in the state capitals. But if you can catch them at home and in their districts, you start building the relationship there, whether that is going out for coffee with them and not, let me be clear about this, Nathan, not starting the relationship with the intent because you want something. You're starting the relationship to have the relationship. And then once that you have that relationship, obviously things are going to come up. And I find the best relationships I have are not partisan related at all. It's whether or not I have spent the time and the effort as a lobbyist to do that, and go to their districts and meet them where they are. But I think it's more important for the podcast listeners to understand that they're just human beings. I know we think of them as these figures that you have to respect and honor. And of course, you have to respect and you have to honor them. Those are important things because they have important jobs and they have a lot of demands on their time. But they're human beings at the end of the day. They have kids. They go to grocery stores. They go to movies. They spend time with their families. So asking them, how's your family doing? Remembering, if they tell you, oh, my wife Sharon did da da da, well, then remember that Sharon did whatever da 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 was. So the next time you see them, say, hey, how last time we were talking, you were saying Sharon did da da da. How was that? They will go, oh, that was great. Yeah, da, da. And so then they're going to respond in a way that I think builds that relation. Then it's important. Then when you have that piece of legislation that's really hurting your business or really is not something that you support, now you have built that relationship to ask them to, hey, it's your old friend Cliff. Remember me? I hate this bill. Can you tell me why this bill is happening or this provision of this bill? It will get you so much more. I can't tell you how important relationships are. It is the
Uh,
foundation of lobbying. Honestly, it's the foundation of lobbying, whether it be grassroots lobbying and the members of the association, or if it's lobbyists like me. It's all relationships.
Yeah, no, I mean that's fantastic advice, Cliff, especially for our listeners. And I want our listeners to know that if they want to hear more about these strategies and other insights, that they should make sure to register for NCBA's Executive Experience Conference that's coming up in April, where you're going to be covering this in a lot more detail. And folks can go to creditorsbar.org under events and register. So I think you're right, on track for the kinds of thing that will make such a difference within the advocacy efforts of our organization. But, moving on to our next question, what are the key issues and legislative priorities that creditors' rights the industry expects to see nationwide, during the legislative sessions? Like, as you said, California is longer, but many states have just 3 months and they're all running simultaneously. So what are you seeing?
Well, to me, it's consumer protection and it's consumer data. It's what that data is being used for. It's the privacy related to that. California got our data privacy laws done a variety of years ago. I want to say 5, 6 years ago, sort of pre-pandemic, and it's been modified and continues to be modified as our privacy agency moves forward. But that is not true across the country. And so I have heard of a variety of bills that are popping up in a variety of states, particularly since the federal government does not look like they're going to step in and have one overarching data privacy issue. The other issues are consumer protection in each state. And what I mean by consumer protection is really in the creditor debt space. Each state has their own laws. The National Consumer Law Center came out with their rankings. California is a B, but we also almost always see very aggressive pieces of legislation. And so I think you're going to continue to see legislation that has been started here in California to try to be replicated in other states. And what specifically we have been seeing here in California is a sort of continued attack at trying to go at what is people's levies and wage garnishments. Specifically, we have gone in California. There's a bill last year that tried to require that debt judgment creditors in the debt space must actually have address verifications done by a certain specific way for the debtor before you can actually go get a wage garnishment or a levy. Well, that is a significant hurdle now that you have to overcome to just go out and enforce the judgment you already have against the debtor. Additionally, we have seen a variety of, there's always incomes that are exempted from being able to be collected. California's law has continued to move that up, that threshold up, and I think you're going to see similar efforts in other states move in that direction, Nathan. So to me, it's those two issues. It's what we've seen in California is going to start being replicated in other states, in my opinion. But I look forward to hearing from the podcast listeners on some of the issues they're also hearing about
Yeah,
and
I mean
seeing.
that's really insightful. I mean, that of what we are expecting coming down the pike this legislative session, and so it leaves me to, how does a lobbyist or a grassroots advocacy group, influence legislators in a highly competitive legislative environment?
Well, again, it goes back to the relationships, Nathan. If you have the relationships, it is easier to communicate your position because now you're not walking in and saying who you are and why you're there. You already have that foundation in place. Building coalitions. So in California, it is not just the California Creditors Bar Association standing alone. We work with the California Bankers Association. We work with the Credit Union League. We work with the California Association of Collectors. We work with RMAI. We work with Cal Chamber, our chamber organization. So what we try to do is to build a broad coalition of banks and so from creditors perspective to debt collectors to the chamber. We are always trying to make the small business arguments. We're trying to point out the aggressive tactics that are typically done in these bills. And if I can spend 1 minute on that quickly, Nathan, what happens is, and this is just the nature of legislation, maybe it's just in California because we have such a long process, but people start asking for everything. And that's just, asking for the entire kitchen sink, sort of throw all the stuff in the kitchen sink. You want it all. That's what you want. And that's where the consumer groups, at least here in California, start. And so then it requires us as a coalition, usually playing defense, going out and trying to whack some of the bigger pieces out of the bill. And you do that by advocating collectively, by using those relationships, by pointing out where things may be inconsistent or could be a workload issue. But working through that process and whittling the bill down to something is where we can have, I think, the biggest success. But again, this is in California. California is made up of 75% Democrats and 25% Republicans in both houses. And so you can imagine it is a much more uphill battle here in California to advocate on behalf of all of you, but it is a worthy mission. We have to do what we have to do to make sure that the credit markets are still out there, that there's still available credit for folks like us and others who want to be able to, not have to pay cash for a brand new television or a medical expense or something else. So it's not an easy job, Nathan, but it is rewarding. But it really, sort of takes a village to work on some of these things because they are hard. And again, our partisan makeup of our legislature isn't the easiest thing in the entire world.
Right. But it does sound like with persistence, you can make a difference, even in a really polarized political, atmosphere. Is there
Yes.
have you had any successes or anything surprise you where you thought there's no way I'm going to get bipartisan support and something happened where the relationships that you built before really paid off?
Yeah, I mean it happens all the time. Honestly, there was I can think of a circumstance a couple of years ago where we were asking for a very technical amendment to a piece of legislation, And the whole coalition said, we can't, keep banging our head. And I said, well, let me try one. I have this relationship with this one staffer in a very progressive member's office. Let me have a conversation with them and just, really just get down to it. So I walked in and said, hey, can we, go for a walk and just sort of talk in general about what is happening here? And this friend of mine said, yeah, of course, Cliff, let's go for this walk. And so we literally walked around the Capitol. We got a cup of coffee and walked around the Capitol, and we talked through these issues. And at the end of the day, I was able to convince him, and he was able to convince his boss to ask for that specific amendment. And that technical amendment was very beneficial to the industry, to everyone. And it was just, again, using that relationship. But you can't, it's not going to happen every time. And while I still have that relationship and use that relationship from time to time, it is not, no matter how good of a lobbyist I am, sometimes you can't sell everything, Nathan. And that's where you just have to say, okay, that avenue is closed. Another avenue is going to open up. The final thing I'll say, I guess, on this topic is there's no one correct way to advocate. It is an art. It is not a science. I may have a political science degree and a law degree, and am a lawyer, but it is not. It is not a science. It's an art, and how you strategically approach it, and when you strategically approach it. Lobbying oftentimes is about relationships. It's about understanding the policy, understanding where your clients are and what they're willing to do and where they're willing to go, and then it's about really finding the right time to sort of activate, to pull that lever. How do you, move in that certain direction? And so, uh, that was one example that I'm proud of. A lot of folks have said to me quietly, I don't know how you pulled that off. And it's you get lucky sometimes. And honestly, I've been, to sort of take it in a personal direction, I've been so blessed in my life to have the opportunities I've had, the wonderful clients I've had, the relationships I've had. I try very hard to be a person of integrity and honesty. And I try to do what I say I'm going to do. And honestly, it's one of those things where if you're nice to people and you're respectful to people and you approach people where they are and understand where they're coming from, you can have
Yeah.
success regardless of what the issue is. You may not get everything you want, but you're going to have some success in the advocacy world.
Yeah, no, look, this was great, and we're coming to the end of our cup of coffee, so to speak. And I just want to thank you, Cliff, for sharing your insights and experiences with us today. Um, and I'm excited because for our listeners, I want them not to forget to register for our executive experience in April, which is going to be in a beautiful location. But it's more than that. There's going to be some real practical and useful tips on how to build out your advocacy program in your state, and where where folks can hear more from Cliff and other experts in the field. So make sure our listeners go ahead and register for the executive experience coming up. But with that, until next time, thank you, Cliff, and
Thank you.
for our listeners, this was NCBA's Coffee Break, and we'll see you on for our next cup of coffee. So thank you so much.
Thank you.